welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, the Corvette is still on the lift behind us. We're in the middle of the big suspension upgrade that we've been working on that car. So we've got the bushings, the coilovers, the subframe. Well, subframe's down right here. Subframe, steering rack bushings, just a bunch of stuff that we've been working on. Well, I was working on the back and I was actually taking the coilovers out and I ran into the problem. The problem I ran into was actually with the CV boot, and I actually tore it taking it out of the car. Now I don't know if that happened from the coilover, when I was trying to take out the coilover out, did it hit the boot, did it pierce it? But basically we've got a axle that needs to be repaired. And I looked online, you can buy the boot kits. The boot kits are like, from GM, they're like $65 to $75 for a boot, just one boot and the clamps with it. Then you actually have to go buy the tool. I believe the tool's another $35 to $40. So you're looking at well over $100 for just replacing one boot. That's not both of them. So what you guys see here is actually a used C5 Z06 axle. I actually did buy a pair of these. I'll have the part number down below. It's like a 1101 something. I'll have that down below for you. I don't remember the full number. But for the cost of one used C5 Z06 axle, I ended up getting this axle for $50 shipped. And yes, there was a little bit of corrosion on the hub, but all I did was I took a wire brush, knocked it off, I hit it with some SEM trim black, and it came back like looking brand new. So really can't complain about how it looks. I almost painted the other end, but honestly guys, this is still in pretty good shape, but this front end just was looking real bad. So I did say a pair of Z06 axles. I know you guys only see one. Well, something got screwed up in shipping, so they only shipped one axle. They've already sent the second item. I haven't gotten it yet. Got the tracking number. It's supposed to be delivered today, but FedEx, there's no way it's getting from Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee to North Carolina in a day, and there hasn't been any tracking update. And plus, it still has to go through the FedEx hub in Charlotte before it gets out to here. So it'll probably be Monday. Today is a Saturday. Probably be Monday at the earliest before I see that axle. So we'll actually go ahead and get this rear passenger side axle installed today. The driver's side will replace, whenever it comes in. So there's actually a number of reasons why we ended up with the C5 Z06 axles. One was cost. We already talked about this a little bit. The outer boot for just the C6 was gonna be $100 with the tool. I got the whole axle for $50. Actually, I got a pair of axles for $90 shipped. I used some like eBay coupons. I think I got it down to like $82 in tax, shipped to the house for 2 axles. That's not a bad idea. Second is strength. Basically, these axles will bolt up and onto all C5s, I believe automatic and manual, and up to a certain year on the Corvettes on the C6. I believe it's going to be the 2000, it'll work for the 05, 6, 7, and 8. I believe 2009 when the ZR1 came out. When the ZR1s came out, they actually have their own hubs. The rear hubs are different. The spline count's different, I believe, on the outer edge and the inner edge. So there's axle differences on the C6. And basically, none of that stuff will work on my car because I've got I think my transmission and diff came out of an 08. Yeah, that's right. So the 08 and earlier will work for sure. And, like I said, kind of the third factor would almost be price again. If you guys go with an aftermarket axle, basically you're going to spend almost $2,000 for a set of axles. You're basically going to spend about $1,000 per side, either from G-Force or Drive Shaft Shop. I believe there might be a third axle manufacturer out there, the stub manufacturer. I don't remember what the third one is, but like I said, strength, cost, and all that does come into play into what we have here. And so that's why we end up with the C5 Z06 rear axles. Also, one thing, we are going to be replacing the rear axle seal with the passenger side because, as you guys know, earlier, I'll have a link to that video up above, we actually had to replace the driver's side rear main seal on the axle. So we're just going to go ahead, swap that out today as well, and that way when we get our new axle in, nothing's going to leak. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, so you will see that my car is highly torn apart, and this will be a little bit different than like a normal axle install. We've already got the tow rod popped out, we've already got the sway bar disconnected. The lower ball joint does not have a nut on it. The upper ball joint's loose. and you guys can see the new bushings that we've already put in. So like I said, this will vary a little bit. The first step you're going to want to do is use a 33mm axle nut socket and bust that off. Wow, that came right off. Alright, there you go. You've got your axle nut off. And just kind of depending on how tight this is all going to be, I might be able to just lift this up. Alright guys, well we got this whole rear end tore apart. You'll see that the axle is not in the housing. The axle is actually down here, and you'll see where we tore it. You guys can see the green axle grease that's inside of it, so that's out. The rotor and brake are sitting on a piece of wood on a bench. I had a hell of a time trying to get that out, and finally I just had to disconnect both upper and lower ball joints, and finally I was able to pull the whole axle assembly out and get this apart. I think honestly what I'll do for the driver's side, I'll leave the lower ball joint in. When the ball joint's still connected on the bottom, what you can do is disconnect the top and swing the whole kind of axle assembly out of the way and pull it up and out that way. The way I did it was just crazy, and it ended up being way more harder than it should be. I ended up disconnecting the e-brake line, the upper and lower ball joints. You guys can see the lower control arm here. And anyway, oh, and the other thing to make note, our rear brake line is still not tight. What we're gonna do next is actually replace the rear axle seal back here. You'll see I got this rear axle seal puller. This is from OEM. I'll have a part number down below for this. And we also have a new axle seal. This is part number 19259473. And we'll get the other one pulled out and this one pressed in. Alright guys, well the axle seal came out kind of in 3 pieces. You guys will see that I put a couple screws into the outer half of the seal just to try to get some grip on something. So I put 2 self-tappers in there and a longer screw. And all I did was just thread it in with a hand screwdriver. I wasn't like using any power tools or anything. I was able to pop that out. Then I was able to pop the outer piece out, you know, the farthest inner piece. Then it also brought the, I guess you'd call that the tension ring, whatever you want to call that. This little coiled spring part that also came with it. But here's the new seal. And we've already gone ahead and cleaned out the axle stub hole. So we can go ahead and press that new seal in. So my plan for that is to actually use a really wide socket. I believe this is a 36mm. And while this isn't the perfect diameter, what I did last time was I just kind of tapped it on one side, tapped it on the other, tapped it in, tapped it in, tapped it in. That's what we're going to do here. And actually, I think I might just move the socket around and just tap it in slowly. That way we can get the new seal in place. All right, we got the passenger side rear axle main seal pushed in. You guys will see that the diameter is a little bit smaller than the other one. I think what happened was over the years, they just kind of made the bearing, the seal bearing, a little bit smaller, and this just has a little bit less of a flange on it than that one does. So now that we got the seal pressed in, you know, pretty much with the socket and a hammer, like I said, not hitting it too hard. All right, so here's the C5Z axle. That is the axle in the back against the stock C6 base model axle. And you know, just looking at it, I don't really see any construction differences in it. They almost look the same diameter. The C5Z might be a little bit thicker. I imagine it's not too much different because, like I said, they kind of carry over parts into the C6. And the splines and all that looks the same. So that's pretty much it. Now my plan of attack to get this axle in, you guys will see that I put the lower control arm on the bench right here. So what my plan is to actually slide the rear of the axle in. Then I'm going to grab the brake assembly, put it on the ball joint, and then kind of swing everything down and out of the way and get the front stub into the rear main hub. So I think that's my plan of attack. Alright, so that actually went together really quickly. Like I said, I stabbed the rear of the axle in. I put the lower control arm on the bench like I was telling you right here. So I grabbed the whole assembly, I stuck the axle nut side of the axle through the hub, and then at the same time I also grabbed it and put it on the lower ball joint, and everything kind of slid back together. And just for safety, I put the axle nut back on. I mean, obviously this is loose, and now what we need to do is get the upper control arm pressed down. I think this will go pretty quickly, yeah, like that. And then I'll just get this ball joint lifted up into place and slid into the upper control arm. So, alright guys, well, that's pretty much be it for the rear axle install. You guys can see we have the push into the diff end, that's in, the hub end is in. I have tightened this down, but I haven't torqued it. I'll have the torque value down below for that when you still need to torque that. Got the upper ball joint tightened down. The lower ball joint is on, but I have not tightened that nut, castle nut, all the way. Still need to do the electrical, the e-brake, the tow rod, but I need to actually get something else in here before that. So that's pretty much gonna be it for the passenger side. Now we can go ahead, move on over to the driver's side. All right guys, here's the second axle. I think I commented on the earlier part of the video where this axle hadn't showed up. Well, FedEx actually lost my axle. It was supposed to get here last Saturday. It ended up getting here on Thursday. And the funny thing is, I actually posted on my Instagram account just a little meme about my axle supposed to be here on Saturday. That actually got forwarded to my Twitter account, and then actually FedEx replied to my Twitter account. They reached out to me, they gave me a tracking number update. They said it was in this Connecticut facility when it got lost and misshuffled from Tennessee. But it did eventually end up back at the house, and it's here. So let's go ahead and get this installed on the driver's side. All right guys, so this rear end is gonna be a bit messed up looking, but we got the driver's side axle out. It's sitting down here on the floor. All I really did was loosen the ball joint up right here, kind of grabbed the whole brake assembly, pulled it off the hub, pulled the hub out the back here. And then I got enough room and just pulled the drive shaft out of the diff in the back. So here's our new to me, C5 Z06 rear axle. And like I said, as you guys can see, I painted this one. Because if you guys look, the factory one was still in pretty good shape. Yeah, it had some marks on it, but wasn't nearly as bad and rusty as this one is. So, all right, we got this rear driver's side C5 Z06 axle in the car. This was a bit of a handful, guys. You'll see that the floor jack is down. Basically what I had to do was slide the axle into the diff. I then slid the entire brake assembly forward and up on top of the jack stand so that I pretty much had straight access to the rear differential, and I was able to slide that axle right in. And basically what I had to do was grab the whole hub assembly, so the brake caliper, the rotor, the spindle, and wiggle that up until I had enough room to slide the axle into the hub and get that to push forward. Then I just put the 33mm axle nut on here. I put another nut on the bottom of the ball joint, and I was able to get the axle in first, and then I was able to get it up and over the upper ball joint into the upper control arm. And that's pretty much it. What we got to do now is actually install the lower control arm, tighten up the rear tow rod, as well as install the rear coilover. So let's go ahead and get all that stuff started, and we'll get this project finished up. We're all done here in the back. You guys can see that we have the coilover installed. We got the upper bushings. We got the axle in, which was the purpose of this video. So we got the rear C5Z axle in. I torqued the nut down to 160 foot-pounds. Put a little bit of red Loctite on that. I've seen conflicting statements on that, whether it's 150 versus 160. So I just went with 160, and we're all good there. Sway bar is attached and all that. The rear tow rod, tie rod, whatever you can call that, that's all tied up. The coilover is installed, and everything is torqued down here in the back. So we are 100% done. Alright guys, so that's actually be it for the C5Z axle swap over on the C6. So after we finish up all of these suspension projects and go get an alignment, you know, we'll take the car out for a test drive, we'll film that, and we'll provide you guys an update then. So if you want to see that video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications, and if you guys want to help support the channel, click all the links down below, check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com, and I'll try to have a link to those C5Z axles. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.